Top 10 Scariest Nightmares Experienced by People. Everybody has nightmares. Asking someone to describe their worst nightmare is probably like watching a stretched water balloon burst. It happens instantly and with very little effort on your part. Every nightmare is unique in their own way because it stems from the individual's imagination and experiences in their life. Nightmares are especially memorable because they are so horrific, and they can be brought on by a variety of factors including sleep paralysis, medication, and even those scary movies that you hate but have been peer pressured into by your best friends. Hello, and welcome back to our channel. In this video, we will bring you 10 of the scariest nightmares people have had. Watch until the end and let us know how your nightmares stack up against ours. Number 10. Being decapitated by a blade. Can you imagine the terror being beheaded by a shiny double-edged blade? Well, this individual has. In this nightmare, she was given the death sentence of decapitation for some unknown offense. It didn't bother her too much. She felt brave and was ready for whatever came her way until they put her head on the chopping block. There was a sudden, overwhelming feeling of panic, a sense of panic that she has never experienced before in her entire life. Her body went numb, but she felt a tingling and chilling sensation that shook her to her core. Then there was a loud bang, and the knife fell, and for a time there was a silence. The feeling she felt was not physical pain, but something much, much worse. There was an extreme discomfort within her body, but she couldn't pinpoint where this grim feeling was coming from. Kind of like that feeling where you have an itch, but no matter where you scratch, that itch still remains. Albeit, this sinister feeling of hers was much, much worse. The next thing she remembers is navigating through a made-up town very gingerly while gripping onto her own decapitated, lifeless head. Even though she rarely recalls this dream, this one was as real as they come, and it continues to give her the creeps to this day. Number 9. Sky replaced by a giant eyeball. This one comes from a Reddit user named Tentacles Feet. He claims that in his nightmare, him and his family were out swimming in their family pool in the backyard. He dives underwater, and when he comes up for air, all of his loved ones have vanished into thin air. He looks up at the sky, and it was dark as can be. There was also an eerie silence. Then suddenly, the darkness in the sky unfolds and transforms into a huge, bloodshot eyeball, glaring straight into his soul. He can even feel the piercing glare of this giant eyeball vibrating throughout his entire body. He eventually woke up, gasping for air. This was one of his scariest dreams in a very long time. Number 8. Tentacles Feet. This story was posted on Reddit by an anonymous Redditor. In this dream, he was lying on his bed, just a lazy Sunday morning. But then he felt a slight pain at the bottom of his feet. He stood up from his bed and inspected where this odd pain was coming from. He notices a rash being formed around his feet. Then these rashes mutated into dots and bubbles in a matter of seconds. These bumps eventually exploded into pus-filled boils and eventually turned into long, spiraling tentacles. between 20 and 30 tentacles on each foot, and each of them around an inch in diameter, flailing and waving around like they have a mind of their own. Just minutes after the birth of these monstrous tentacles, their lives abruptly ended, and they began to dry up and shrivel up, eventually turning into scabs. In his memory, these scabs looked and felt very similar to charred wood. He screamed as loud as he could from the horror that he has just experienced. And then he opened his eyes. Number 7. Drowning in his own blood. This post was contributed by a user on Reddit known as Chuck FKN Diesel. The nightmare where he was high on hydromorphone at Loma Linda, a city in San Bernardino County, is one that sticks out in his memory as the worst nightmare he has ever had. In his nightmare, he was encased in a glass box and placed in the middle of a shopping mall. His limbs were impaled by countless rivets, and thick red blood was oozing out of the wound. His gushing blood started to fill up the glass box that he was imprisoned in, the blood slowly reaching his knee level. His anxiety and panic were now through the roof. He was yelling and screaming for someone to help him. But the people at the mall did not have a care in the world. The glass box continued to fill up, now the blood just below his chin. He realized that he was about to be drowned by his very own blood. He took one last breath and closed his eyes, realizing that this was the end. When he opened his eyes, he was in his bedroom, soaked in sweat. Number 6. Self-inflicted open heart surgery. This person had the same reoccurring nightmare, and she swears that this was the most horrific one she has ever had. In this nightmare, she describes having an uncontrollable urge to scratch her chest, digging her claws through her flesh until she reaches her beating heart. When she eventually grabs hold of her heart, she shoves it in her mouth and eats it bit by bit. She can feel the fleshy heart still beating as it travels down her throat. She then proceeds to apply pressure to the wound until she regains consciousness. The entire time she was in the dream, she was sobbing and screaming, but her primary desire was to feast on her own heart. It's quite strange, and every morning she wakes up, she finds scratches all over her chest. Simply thinking about it makes us quiver. Number 5. The bomb that wiped everyone out. Boom! This nightmare is about bombs. The setting in this nightmare is in his very own living room. All of a sudden, he hears a loud explosion. Looking out the window, he sees a massive mushroom cloud in the distance. A nuclear bomb has just been detonated. His sisters both came running down the stairs with fear in their eyes. About a minute after the initial blast, they felt the shockwave pass right through them. It was not painful, but definitely uncomfortable. After what seemed like 5 minutes, a second bomb exploded. This one definitely sounded closer than the first, judging by the thunderous blast. This time, the heat and radiation from the shockwave felt like a second-degree burn on their skin. The surface of their skin became raw and sandy. They thought to themselves, "This is where we die." They were on a dead-end street, and their next-door neighbor and their 2 kids came running out of their house. As another nuclear bomb detonates just kilometers away, they approached their neighbor and asked, "When are they going to stop?" The neighbor turns over to them with an ominous grin when we are all dead. The blast wave crashed in and the nightmare was over. Number 4. Something behind the door. This nightmare comes from a Redditor named Lenavis. He was having lunch with his family at home. The room is bright and sunny and the day was lovely. In the blink of an eye, he heard a loud commotion coming from the garage. Nobody else appears to notice, and when he tries to bring it up, he gets completely ignored. He then keeps a watchful eye on the garage door while they continue to dine as a family. From the corner of his eye, he sees the doorknob at the garage turn gently, and then suddenly, the movements on the doorknob became more and more violent. He is filled with fear, and his body froze as he awaits the creature or monstrous being to crash through the doors at any second. The nightmare does not continue on. The lack of resolution has always filled him with dread, and he can't decide if he is relieved or horrified that the door didn't open. Number 3. Paintings of family horror. This person had experienced a nightmare where he was working at his at-home woodworking shop. He was working on a wooden chair for his grandmother when suddenly his uncle called for him to accompany him in the living room. Upon entering, he was greeted by macabre murals depicting gruesome images of people getting murdered plastered throughout the house. One of the paintings in particular showed a woman with a saw stuck in her throat, and it was at that point when he realized that that woman in the photo was his mother. He was completely taken aback when he realized that every painted mural was a member of his own family. Now, in complete shock, he quickly ran back to his workshop. That was when he was greeted by the sight of his entire family lying dead in the positions that were precisely depicted in the murals displayed throughout the house. As soon as he turned around, he saw his uncle standing there, holding a photo of him decapitated by a large cleaver in one hand, and on the other hand, the same large cleaver. His uncle then whispered in a sinister tone, "Let's create some art." Number 2. Dying little girl. This reoccurring nightmare began when he was 14 years old, and it starts off with him sitting cross-legged in front of a temple with a young girl seated in his lap. Everything was in black and white. This young girl had long black hair and wore a bright white outfit. The world around her was monochromatic. She gave off such a pure appearance. He was aware in the dream that she was passing away slowly while he held her in his arms. He has been experiencing this dream for a very long time, and every time he does, this little girl gets closer and closer to passing away. He doesn't know who this girl is, but he loves her very much and cares deeply for her. Seeing this little girl growing weaker and weaker and dying day by day is the most excruciating aspect of this nightmare. He has the unsettling impression that there was something that he could do, but he had no idea what that was. After having the same dream for over a year, he eventually had the dream where she passed away while he was holding her in his arms, and from that point on, he never dreamt about that little girl again. Until this day, he still doesn't know who this person is, but he continues to have the feeling that he has let her down. Number 1. The End of the World. This story is from an anonymous Redditor. According to this person, the nightmare is about the end of the world, which she has experienced twice before, and it is by far the most terrifying thing that has happened to her in her sleep. In the first scenario, She left her house and headed across the street to pay a visit to her grandmother. She turns around and sees her house blown up into pieces after being hit by meteors. She looked up at the sky, and streaks of meteors tumbling down towards Earth. The second scenario was of her and her family gathering together in what appeared to be an empty field or a huge dirt lot. They turned around and gazed in the direction of the mountains in the distance. In a matter of minutes, the serene mountains disappeared into a wall of flame. Everyone looked at each other and gave each other a warm embrace, showing their love for each other as the world around them burns to the ground. She also remembers a distinct burning sensation on her back as she hugged her family for the very last time. She is especially troubled by this nightmare about the end of the world, since several members of her family have a history of having prophets in their dream, in which they have seen events in the dream months or even years before they have occurred. Does this mean the world is going to end? What are your worst nightmares? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content. Thanks for watching, and until next time, sleep well.